Coach Day is finally here after like 5 years of trying to get this going here. He's outside linebackers coach at special teams at Eastern Kentucky. Coach, thanks for being here. Glad we finally worked it out through my schedule.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's it never stops. The way the calendar is now, it's kind of never ending. And 7-year-old and 5-year-old at home too. That doesn't always help with scheduling. So, but glad to be here.
Yeah, well, because I coach all 3 sports too. So I do football, basketball, softball. So like when I used to not do that, I could get the spring going, or I can get right before summer going with this.
Right.
Now when I'm like messaging you guys, I'm like very detailed of my times because I'm like, some coaches when I send that to them, they're like, that's the most detailed thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. I can go at 11:17 to 11:24. I've got those 7 minutes free. It's like I can relate to that a little bit.
Oh, it's crazy because the bad thing about spring sports, we could get rained down and the game gets moved or this gets moved.
Oh,
and you're at the That's why I like football, because it's not getting canceled. It's like, unless it's lightning for 4 hours, you are playing.
No doubt. Yeah, absolutely.
Basketball, unless there's a winter storm, you're going.
Right.
But no, finally got you on here. Appreciate it. I know you guys are busy because I always forget about spring ball for some reason. I always forget about the beginning of summer. You guys are out recruiting still and hiring and so I appreciate it. But like, let's talk about you. Like, how'd you get to Eastern Kentucky? We were talking a little bit. You played Butler and everything else. How did you become a coach? Why did you want to do it? How'd you get there?
So I'm originally from Southern Indiana. Grew up in Bedford, Indiana. Went to Mitchell High School, and then played college football at Butler University in Indianapolis. And really enjoyed my time, obviously, at Butler, and went to Butler initially as a business major. At that time, that was in 2005. So at that time, sports management and sports marketing wasn't the market that it is now. But it was kind of the dawn of that, and it was turning into it. And Butler had a program that they were trying to pitch on, kind of on sports marketing and sports management. And it was in its infancy. I had this idea that I could go do that, and then I was either going to work for the Indianapolis Colts, the Indiana Pacers, or what I really wanted to do is I wanted to work at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I grew up going to the 500.
Oh, yeah.
I was a kid with my grandfather, and so I wanted to work at the Speedway. And I went to Butler, and after my freshman year, I started as a true freshman. I was able to play, but I didn't handle my business off the field. And so I got kicked out of the business college. And I always said they were basically like, hey, listen, we're not going to kick you out of the university, but we're going to kick you out of the business college. And so I made my way over to the College of Education. My mother has worked in education for 30 years now. And so made my way over there, got into education, realized that I thought I wanted to coach, really wanted to do it at the high school level at that time, but got about halfway through my student teaching my senior year, was done playing. I got done playing, 08 season. And, I didn't work out for about 6 months. I got everything out of my body that I could get. And I had no delusions of grandeur of chasing it. So, when my career was over, it was over. And halfway through my student teaching, I kind of hit me. I was like, man, I don't want to teach right now. Like, I don't want to go right into a classroom. I was still young. I was young for my class. I was still 21, 22 years old. And I was like, I don't want to be in a high school right now. And so I had one of my high school coaches, Brett Deckard, actually, he pushed me and kind of said, you should go GA. And I said, what's a GA? He said, it's a graduate assistant. You get your grad school paid for. You can get your master's degree, get a little college coaching experience, and then you can always come back and coach high school because you're going to have college experience on your resume. And so it was something that I was like, okay, like, how do I do that? And so the head coach at Indiana University at the time was Bill Lynch, and the head coach at Western Kentucky was David Elson. And those two guys are both Butler guys. And so I reached out to both of them. Indiana didn't have anything, but Western Kentucky did. And so I got a GA job as a strength and conditioning GA. So I graduated in May, started there in June. It was the first full-time job I'd ever had. Graduating from college was to go make $500 a month and get my grad school paid for, and live off of the food in the weight room basically. And I fell in love with it, and instantly was like, I knew I didn't want to necessarily be in the weight room. I didn't want to be a strength coach, but I knew I wanted to be a coach and wanted to be around it. And so it continued to push me. And there was a coaching change at the end of that season. Willie Taggart came in. When Willie came in, I got promoted from being in the weight room to being on the field, and I became a defensive GA. Spent 2 years there as a defensive GA. Got done, left, went to Iowa State University out in Ames, Iowa. Spent 3 years there. Actually did get my master's from Iowa State. Ended up getting my master's in education from there. Met my wife there. My wife is from Des Moines, and was really enjoyed it. Had a great experience. Worked for Paul Rhodes. Was a GA for a guy named Wally Burnham, who was our defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. And Wally is a legend in this profession as far as linebacker coaches go. And so I really, I kind of got an education on how to coach working for him. He'd played for Bear Bryant, worked for Bobby Bowden. I wrote everything down that I could. Got done with that, and I was 6 years in, and I met my wife, and I was kind of ready to get out. And really, really good friend of mine, was my roommate when we were at Western Kentucky, had gotten a GA job and was a GA at Tennessee. And he called me, and it had been about 3 months. It was April. I'd gotten done in December and January, and it was April. And he called me and he said, "Hey, listen, I know you said you're kind of getting out. You may get into high school coaching, whatever." He said, "But we got a GA job here. We've tried to hire 4 or 5 guys. They can't get into school, into grad school." He goes, "You already have your master's degree. I know you can probably get in. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yeah." When a place like that calls you, you answer. And so ended up going to Tennessee. Was at Tennessee in the 2015 and 16 school year, and we had a lot of success. We were 9-4 in both those years, and won a lot of big games. And couldn't win the East, but we were able to right the ship in a lot of ways. And left there. My wife and I adopted our daughter in January, and the linebacker job opened back at my alma mater in Butler, and to be 90 miles from my parents' house with a 1-month-old seemed like a good idea. So we went back, and I was at Butler for 3 years, and then Coach Wells got the job here at Eastern in December of 2019. I got here in January 2020. I had worked with him. He was our O-line coach at Western Kentucky. So I'd worked with him for 3 years there, and then he and I had actually worked together again at Tennessee. He was the O-line coach at Tennessee. So we'd worked together on 2 different occasions, and and now I'm going into year 5 here, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
So all in all, this is going to be year 16 for me coaching, which is kind of mind blowing that I've been doing it that long. But it's never a dull moment. Just when you think you've seen it all come to work, it's kind of what I always say.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to year 15 of high school coaching this fall.
Yeah.
I can feel it. I started doing it. I walked on at Eastern, got my butt kicked for that couple practices. I'm like, well, maybe this isn't. So I started coaching right at 18, 19 years old. I'll be 34. I'll be 34 in November. So it's, but like you said, no matter what happens, every day is different. It could be you have it planned out the same, but some happens. And
I got really good advice. And like I said, I worked for Wally Burnham at Iowa State, and I consider Wally to be, one of my biggest mentors. He told me something one time, and everybody kind of looked at his career, and he played at Alabama for Coach Bryant, but he was on the national championship team in 1993 at Florida State. He was a linebacker coach. He coached Derek Brooks. Then he became the DC at South Carolina for 8 years in the mid 90s. And then he went to South Florida, and he was at South Florida for 10 years when that thing was built up to where they were number 2 in the nation.
Right.
There in the early 2000s, like them and West Virginia. I mean, they had some battles, and Wally was the architect of that defense. And then he came to Iowa State. He said, coaching is a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle that you and your family choose. And the best advice he ever gave to me is he said, don't sit there and get caught up in a 5-year plan, because everybody's path is different, and it's a 50-year career. It's not a 5-year plan. And he said, because there's not many guys out there that would sit there and say, I'm at the job I want forever. And that you're telling me there's not any job that anybody would take. I mean, great example. Dude plays for a national championship, and at Washington, and whatever, a week later he leaves that job and goes to Alabama. And so, there's always going to be an opportunity. Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame to go to LSU. There's always going to be opportunities that people can't say no to. And so, if you just continue to work and just continue to try to grow as a coach, and the old phrase of, compete, don't compare to where you're at to where somebody else is, then I think as you continue to grow, your coaching journey and your coaching path will continue to rise if you continue to do that. If you don't grow, then your path's not going to grow.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point, because ever since the transfer portal became a thing, and one of the things they talk about is coaches always leaving, but people from the outside look at it as, I mean, money always kind of matters, but I also think, like you said, it's your coaching path. So if you've done it all at one spot, you need to, and then you have a new challenge because you're continuing to grow. And I don't think people know, like, when certain coaches leave, they have to pay to leave, and that doesn't get talked about. So when people talk about money, and not everybody makes the big time money, we only see. That's why I like talking to you guys about the transfer portal and recruiting and jobs, because ESPN and Fox ain't going to show that, So I think that's a good point.
I've gotten to know in my careers, like I said, I was really blessed. I've been at some really, really high levels. I've been back at my alma mater. I've been at the FCS level now this will be my 8th year at the FCS level. And so, some of the best coaches I've ever been around are high school coaches, Division III NAIA coaches that don't have the notoriety and sometimes there is a generalization, and people see what, they see what Coach Smart's making at Georgia. They see what Coach Sweeney's making at Clemson, those kind of things, and there's just like, oh, well, every coach must make that. It's like, no, that's not exactly how it works. But it is a great profession, and I say this a lot. Guys around the office, our defensive coordinator, he and I always joke. I say, hey man, this beats working for a living. My grandfather worked at General Motors for 35 years, and that was when I got into the profession, and he kind of figured out what I was doing. He said, well, it sure beats working for a living. I said, yes, sir, it does.
but you have long hours too. But I don't think people know that either. Like, there's a reason why you guys are working till 10 p.m. sometimes, just because you get lost in it. Like, oh my God, it's 10 p.m. I got to go home. Right. Especially now with the transfer portal stuff. I know the FCS level is not quite the Power 5 or anything like that, but I know with you guys dealing with that, just talking to people, how more ramped up it is of hosting guys on campus, and more it's become of, well, you're just now, instead of looking at high school, now you have to look at the portal, and then you're making phone calls to coaches and other people, like, is this guy a good person, and vice versa. And so it's just adding more time to communicating back and forth.
Correct. Well, and the big thing is for me, I'm really lucky because I've got a great support system at home. My wife is a former collegiate and professional soccer player, and so she understands, and she was a coach herself, a very successful coach, state championship level coach, and so she understands the time commitment, the effort, the energy. Why are we making recruiting calls at 9 o'clock at night? It's those kind of things that have to happen sometimes. And for me, like I said, I've got a 7.5-year-old daughter who is all about gymnastics right now, and we are very very involved in her gymnastics, and she's actually really good too. So there's a path that we're kind of going down with that. And then my son's 5, and so he's just kind of starting, but he's going to do, I guarantee you, he's going to do everything. He's playing flag football this spring, and I think he's going to play soccer at some point. He's going to play football in the fall. He's done swim. I mean, he just, they're very active. And so I don't want to say your kids become your hobbies. That's not it. But your activities and what you're doing is centered around your work and your family. And And if you can find the balance, and it's a very, very delicate balance, and I'll be honest, it's not always easy. It's hard. Just it kind of like us today. I mean, I ran we got done we had a 10 o'clock staff meeting and I'm the camp coordinator. So we had a 10 o'clock staff meeting to go over the camps that we've got next week, leave out of there, run across town, go to the high school, because my daughter had cheer camp all week this week and they had their performance today. So I watched that. And then we're interviewing a guy on campus. So I had to run over, have lunch with him. And then I'm coming back and then at like 3 o'clock today, I got to go pick up my son from daycare. And so it's just, it's in between you're making recruiting calls. It's like, I sit down sometimes and I'll sit down on the couch and it's like 9:30 and I'm just like, what just happened? Where did the day go? But
right.
For me, it is always, I go back, I'm from Indiana. And so I always heard it's kind of funny. A lot of people are getting exposure, this week. Unfortunately, Bill Walton obviously passed away, but a lot. And I loved Bill Walton. And a lot of things Walton always said were actually the John Wooden maxims. And being from Indiana, you always kind of heard those, and in the basketball world and those kind of things. And,
right.
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Like that is day one for me, in anything that you do. And like that's, as a coach, you have to be, in my opinion, you have to be task oriented, and to a point where you've got to be willing to say, hey man, after my kids go to bed, I have these tasks that I still have to get done. I've still got to call these 5 recruits. I've still got to check on this transfer. I've still got to do those things. And, you can do that from your back patio, and that's, but you don't have to do it sitting in an office. You don't have to do it, in person, wherever they're at. But I mean, you could do that. And if you're willing to do those kind of things, then you're still able to find the balance and have success.
Well, that's why I told you I'm super blessed that you even are, with your busy day, talking to a nobody in Illinois. Like it's, but I also think this is a good time for you to relax too, because this podcast is so easy going. It's, so I do appreciate that. But like,
good start to my Friday afternoon, that's for sure.
And I keep forgetting it's Friday. We're on summer break. I'm like, it's Friday,
and it's Memorial Day. You're still on Memorial Day week, so it's throwing you all off.
And we got done with school last Friday.
Okay.
Tuesday, the head basketball coach said, hey, we're starting basketball camp. So immediately, like, we're right back in it.
There you go.
I took it upon myself to open up a speed camp for all athletics in the high school. So I've been trying to work out with that. So, like, I have had no time off. Yep. My wife's like, aren't you on summer break? And I'm like, what's a summer break?
Exactly. Yep.
You're a coach. There is no summer break.
Absolutely.
But I think about that because our head football coach has 4 kids.
Oh yeah.
They're all close to the same age. He's got 3 girls and 1 boy, and they're getting into softball. They're getting into cheerleading. His son is whatever, and they're super young. I think they're all under the age of 10, maybe. I don't remember. And he's now getting to that point where, like, we're seeing him less, quote unquote, because he's like, I gotta get to watch the cheerleading. I gotta get to watch this, and he lives 40 minutes away from the school without traffic. So like, but he feels bad, like missing anything at the school. Like, no. Like, balance it out. So like, if you're here for just a little bit, or you come in the morning and do something, then you go. Like, right. I don't have kids yet. So I'm like, I could stay for an extra 40 minutes. Like,
right.
My wife might kill me still, but like, I don't have kids. Like, I'm not missing a cheerleading thing or something.
Right.
So he's finding that balance. And another one of our coaches has 4 kids. So like, and he's the head baseball coach. So like, he has to find that balance too. And so we all work together to help each other find that.
What's funny is I worked with so when I talked about being at Iowa State with Wally Burnham, and Wally's son Shane was actually our D tackles coach. And on the offensive side of the ball, my last year there, our offensive coordinator was Mark Mangino, and his son Tommy was our receivers coach. And so we had 2 sets of fathers and sons on staff together.
Wow.
I would be lying if I didn't say there were never fireworks. That there was never some spirited disagreements, I'll say. But what was I actually took it as an opportunity for me, because I wasn't, like, my wife and I were dating at the time, but we weren't married yet. We didn't have any kids. I asked them, I said, hey man, like, I see a ton of coaches' kids, but you were a coach's kid.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? And I remember Shane told a story about, he's like, it was the coolest thing in the world, man. He goes, I rode the bus in Tallahassee. He goes, I got done with school, got on a bus, rode to school to the football facility, got off the bus, and walked out of practice, and Derek Brooks knew my name, and Deion Sanders and Charlie Ward and all these guys that played at Florida State, all these greats at Florida State knew who I was. They're like, oh man, that's Coach Burnham's kid, Shane.
Right.
He said, and like to do that, he said, that made me the coolest kid at school, you know? And he said, but I can't, he said, like, I loved going, he said, I got to go to practice and I got to climb on the pads and drink Gatorade and ride around on the gator and all that kind of stuff. And like, you think about that, and that's like when my wife will bring the kids to practice, and she tries to like once a week just to bring them to practice at the end so that I can see them before we go game plan at night. You know, watching my children interact with the football boys, the boys as my kids call them, is really rewarding. And it's one of those things that like that's becoming part of who my kids are, and it's something that they'll remember forever. And so, you know, I remember being a young coach being like, oh man, I'm just going to always be about ball and da. And I'm like, and I had a coach tell me one time too, he's like, hey man, you better have something to go home to. You better have somebody there and have somebody there that you can turn it off when they need you to turn it off. And that was some more great advice that I got.
I'm learning that too. If I come home mad from a practice, I give myself like 5 minutes. I have to walk in, change, do whatever I got to do, go sit on the chair. Then I'll ask how her day was. Like, then I can't, she's a BCBA, so she deals with kids with like disabilities from all over the spectrum. So if I come in and say, well, this kid did this, she goes, let me tell you about my day. And I'm like, you're right.
I deal. My wife's an educator. She deals in alternative education. And then, of course, she's dealing with, most of the time she's picking the kids up from school. So and she's back and forth to gymnastics, like you said. And so, she's played me videos and sounds and stuff before from her room and been like, when I don't want to talk, this is why. And it's like, and she's in a middle school too. So it's like, even on top of all of that other. So it's like when I, when that's where we're at, and, and then like you said, though, like when I open the door and it dings and I can hear my son running to the door, like, hey man, the recruit that didn't want to talk, or the linebacker that blew an assignment, all of that goes out the window. And because he doesn't care, he just wants to roll cars, or he wants to go play ball or go jump on the trampoline or whatever.
I wanted to circle back. You were talking about your GA time. I found this curious. Like 2 years ago, I'm friends with Nick Davis. He's the head coach at Ottawa. He used to be at Rose-Hulman. He's from Charleston. That's how I got to meet him.
Gotcha.
I asked him, because he had a hard path too of like GAing, living off food stamps, doing this. Then he got the head coach job at Rose-Hulman, finally broke through. Now he's at Ottawa, head coach. And I asked him, I said, are you seeing, because he's always trying to hire GAs. I'm like, are you finding it harder to like get GAs? Because like, it's a tough life. I've never done it, but just talking to people, like, do you guys see that? Like, maybe it's not as many candidates as there used to be. I know getting into school is a big thing, but like, once they find out what it's about and what they got to do, does it turn them away, or am I just misreading this? Because it's a lot of work.
It's I don't want to be. I just turned 37 2 weeks ago, and so I don't feel like I'm an old coach. I still feel like I'm a young coach and running around. But it is interesting the amount of dudes that, and like I said, I took that advice very, very early, that it's not a 50-year career, it's a 5-year plan, or not a 5-year plan, it's a 50-year career.
Right.
There's a lot of dudes that are like, oh, well, I want to go work at this place. Well, yeah, of course you do. Like everybody, like who doesn't want to go work at Alabama or Notre Dame or LSU or Auburn or Georgia or Clemson? I mean, that goes without saying.
Right.
But it's how do you get there? And everybody else in the country wants to work at those places too. So how are you going to separate yourself? And how are you going to continue to work and grow so that when you do get into that position, that you don't look, dumb in that situation? And I do think that I think that there is and I don't know that it's like we're really lucky right now. We have some, like the young coaches that we have on our staff right now are probably the best group we've had in 5 years all across the board. Offense, defense, and special teams is probably the best group we've had. And there's 3 really young guys that this is like their first or second job. They're just trying to get in, and it's the best job they've had. We got another young guy who, had played a couple years in the NFL, was coaching high school ball in Florida and wanted to get up. So he's not a GA, he's a QC.
Okay. Yep.
Which basically means he's a GA and he doesn't take grad school classes. And then we got another guy who's, kind of working as a special teams analyst who had been at the Division III level. He's from the state of Kentucky, and he's wanting to try to get, trying to move up. So he was, instead of being a position coach at Division III level, was taking an analyst job at this level. The big thing for me is everybody kind of wants to, the hardest part is being able to walk in and as a young QC, young GA, you have to be able to know that you don't know anything.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, is because you may have an idea, you may have a thought, and it may not even be about offense or defense or scheme. It may just be about, hey man, what if we set up the scouting reports this way? Or what if we use, I could do this in Excel, or I could, whatever it may be. And, what's hard is especially when you work with certain coaches who've been doing it one way forever, we are creatures of habit, and it is hard. It's hard to grow, especially with the technology and things that have gone on.
Right.
And the other thing you kind of see in a lot of young coaches right now is, instead of just doing the work, they want to, what's the quick way to do it? What's the shortcut to do it? What's the shorthand, the quickest, easiest way? And it's like, nah, man, there's got to be some, like, sometimes it has to suck, like, for lack of a better word. But it kind of builds you into the coach that you are, because you are going to be, there are going to be during the season 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. days.
Right.
And and that's, you got to be ready for that. And actually our head coach here, Coach Wells, he was our O-line coach at Western. And when that staff got fired, he got retained. He was one of the 2 assistants. Him and actually Coach Mathis is our defensive line coach now, who's he's a now closed St. Joseph's High School in Chicago. He was a St. Joe alum. He's a Proviso area guy.
Oh yeah.
He was. Those 2 guys were retained, and I was retained as a GA, and so I got to deal with 2 guys that are getting retained on staff. And I remember asking him a question, and it was really, really good for me, because I learned very quickly. My very first year, I learned, this is a business. This isn't just something these guys do on the side. This is how these guys are paying their mortgages. This is how these guys are sending their kids to college, all those things, right? And for me, that was a great asset, because I started looking at it differently. I started realizing, okay, relationships matter. Being able to stay in touch with people, because it's all about networking. It's who do I know at this school and that school that I can stay in touch with. It's about your ability to coach. And at some point it comes down to, you have to be able to do the job, but it also has to do with who do you know that can recommend you for a position and things like that. And so I learned that at a really, really young age. And I think that some guys, there's kind of 2 schools of thought of it. Either they start somewhere and they don't know how to kind of work to it. And they don't know how to kind of work the hours. And Coach Wells used to always say, just be tougher than the business. The business is tough, but you got to be tougher. If you're not tougher than the business will eventually beat you, and you'll get out of the business for whatever reason. But if you're tougher than the business, you'll make it. And then kind of to piggyback off of that, it's hard sometimes too. And now you have so many kids. Like we've got a young man on our staff right now who, he was a student. He didn't play college football. Played high school football. I may have walked on for a year, but then transferred and went to the University of Kentucky solely for the purpose of being a student assistant coach. Came into the office every day, worked every day, and did a lot of good things. Became a GA there and did some things. Ended up coming here as an analyst, and then we had a tight end job open, and he got promoted. And Brady does a great job, and he's kind of a rare case. But sometimes when people come from those positions, a la, the joke is the army of analysts, right? Of the people that are all these SEC schools. And there's a lot of support. There's a lot of people who want to be in those positions. But then when you go from a place like that to a Butler University where there's 5 full-time guys and then there's 5 volunteers,
Yep.
And you've also got to be the travel coordinator. You've also got to be the food coordinator. You've also got to be the assistant strength coach. Whoa, you mean I got to do all that? Yeah, you do. And sometimes I feel like there's just such a disconnect. Like we're all technically playing the same game, but we're playing it on different, we're just playing it on different levels. And, there's definitely a rookie level and there's a master level. And so finding that balance sometimes is really, really hard. And that's why for me, I mean, I did the GA thing. Like I said, did the GA thing for 6 years, was a QC for 2 years before I ever got my own room and was able to run anything from a position standpoint on my own. And, everybody kept telling me, yeah, you got to go get your own room. You got to go get your own room. You got to go get experience. And I did, but also those 8 years of I worked for so many great coordinators along the way, and it was Mike Dietzel, Clint Bowen, Lance Guidry at Western Kentucky. It was Wally at Iowa State. It was John Jancic at Tennessee. And it was, working with Willie Martinez at Tennessee and Zach Azzani was with, all these great coaches that I got a chance to work with and got to learn from. And it got me ready so that, it was like slow aged. By the time I got to, okay, now you're 30 years old. You're 30 years old. You're going to be in your first time full position room. You're at your alma mater, but you're ready. And and to that's the thing is it's kind of like, I would rather have the slow build up and then be ready when I get there than shoot to the top, not be ready, come back down, and then never be able to get back to that level.
Right. Because I know high school is way different than that, but like ever since COVID, we just can't find coaches. Like that's been a huge problem. Like we still have like 2 stipends open, and there was one year we had 4, and we didn't get them filled till August.
Yeah.
Like we just couldn't find coaches, and it was a couple reasons. One, is there a job in the building? No, well, I'm not coming. Okay, we get it. Second one was, well, we have our varsity staff in place. You're gonna have to do JV or freshman. They're like, nope, I want to do just this. Okay, have you ever coached before? Well, I've coached like a year of youth football. And we're like, well, the head coach is like, well, you got to prove yourself to me a little bit. Like what, like I was fortunate that I could go straight to varsity, but I was coaching for 12 years at the time. So like I had this experience. And so that's another reason. And then it's the time. So wait a minute, you're going to pay me $5,000 and I've got to be here from 3:30 to 6 practice. I got to watch film. I got to go do my game. And then I got to go to varsity and film. I'm not a film guy. And I'm like, and that type of thing. And we get it, but we're like, the head coach is like, yeah, this is what I'm going to need because we got jobs. Everybody on staff has a job to do, whether it's stats, filming.
Right.
You could be holding the iPad for us, but on the sideline talking to us. Cool. And we respect everybody. Like we all talk, but like, that's the job. And I'm paying you. Like, I'm going to give you a stipend. I know it's only $5,000, but I have volunteers that are here getting paid nothing. And that's been the issues that we're having. And so I didn't know if it was happening at the college level or not, because people will call me, hey, you guys got any volunteers or coaches that need a job? I'm like, well, no, but if you have some, because we can't find them either.
And I think that, and it's good help's hard to find, but it's such a thin line too. You want to have guys that are really, really good. And, for us, like we've had guys leave here and go become, GAs at like the offensive line GA at the University of Georgia right now was a GA here 2 years ago. The offensive line GA at Georgia Tech or UNLV was here 2 years ago. We got a guy that's at Akron as a GA that played here and was a GA here for a year and then moved on. And so you want to have those guys who can be risers and who maybe some day down the road you can either bring back here as an assistant, or if I'm coaching somewhere else, I can have it as an assistant. But it's also like you want to have guys who you can have around for a couple of years. You won't have to keep reteaching everything every year.
Right.
It's a thin line, but yeah, I mean, it is hard because, I've always tried to step on every football field that I've ever coached on with excitement, energy, and with the idea that I was the best coach on the field. I wasn't. Far from it. Still am not. But I tried to approach it that way in my own mind. And so you have to believe that. It's kind of like being a player. Like, you have to believe you're the best or you're never going to be. But at the same time, you have to be, the era of instant gratification. Oh, I want to work at Notre Dame. Well, yeah, of course you do.
Right.
A lot of people do. But you've got to be able to work to that level. And,
right.
40-year-old coaches are, oh, he's a young head coach at 40. Well, yeah, he's been coaching for 18, 20 years.
Right.
By the time he's 40. And so when people, that gets like, people just think it just happens overnight, and it doesn't. And that's the hard part in this profession is, and then you look up and you see guys. I mean, like I said, when I was working for Wally at Iowa State, Wally was in his early 70s. He was our defensive coordinator, and he had as much energy and fire as anybody that I was around. He was still a great recruiter. He was a great tactician. He was a great linebacker coach. And he was 72, 3 years old at that time. It's like, dude, like, I have no excuse not to have energy from this guy. But I'm like, but look at him. He's almost 40, 50 years my senior, and he's still learning, and he's still willing to grow, and he's still trying to grow. And I think that's one thing that's getting lost right now is so many people just, oh, well, I want to be the coach. I want to be in charge. I laugh. My son, I told you, he's doing the 5-year-old flag football thing right now. I try very, very hard to stay out of it. And I got asked to kind of help a little bit. And so I'm helping just a little bit. And, but there's some coaches that I look out on there, and I'm like, you're missing the, do you want to, and I've said this before, and I think this is kind of one of the things about the profession. It kind of goes to what you're saying. Do you want to coach, or do you want to be called coach? Because that's kind of two different things. And if you actually, why did you get into the profession? Do you actually want to help mentor young people and help mold and shape young people? And, do you want to have a connection to the game? And do you want to have, do you want to have an impact on young people? Or do you want to have do you want to be out there on a Friday night and people be able to say you're a coach? I don't know. I don't know what everyone's reasoning. And at some point, there's a little bit of both probably. But I think that's one of the things sometimes that we get caught up in is, does he want to coach or be called coach? And it's like you said, it's hard to find some people. And as you continue to go through the process and you continue to go through years, and that's why guys get weeded out. It's like, oh yeah, I coached football for 3 years and then I decided not to. And it's like, it's not for everybody. It really isn't. Like I said, it's a lifestyle choice as opposed to a profession choice.
Yeah, I'm probably both, but my reason for being both is I want to do this since I was 14. I was 14 years old, and I'm like, I'm going to be a coach.
There you go.
And the reason why I like being called coach is because I think it's a respect thing, because it's like I've earned it. But you're right. I think there's two different types. There's my type, then there's the type of I can post a picture and say I'm coaching on a Friday night, like, look at me, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that comes from a younger perspective. Now, we all did. I was a 23-year-old offensive coordinator for varsity. And I was like, I know it all. And I learned very quickly.
I played the first football. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It took 2 years before, a year and a half, like the second season, halfway through the second season, and like a light bulb went off. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know as much as I think I do. And I don't need to call every play I see on Saturdays that I like.
Yes. Absolutely. That's another great point. Yes, absolutely.
So I was both. I thought I knew it all. I'm like, I'm going to be called coach. And then I'm like, and I like being called coach because it's fun. Like, coaching is fun on a Friday night. I love it. Absolutely. Whatever it is.
Like I said, beats working for a living.
Oh, yeah. But I also like helping kids. Like,
yes,
a kid will message me. He had kind of a rough home life. They'll message me and be like, this happened. I'm just walking the streets. And I'll be like, oh, what do you need from me? Like, it never shuts off.
Right.
It could be 2 a.m. and they could call me and they don't know what to do. And you're like, okay, well, let me, whatever. In school, they'll come find me. Coach, I had a bad night at home. My dad walked out or whatever. And you're like, okay, like, you want to talk to a counselor? No, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, like.
There's so much. And like, I mean, I've been doing this, like I said, this will be year 16. And, I've had players who have, during their time playing for me, who've had children.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a linebacker a couple of years ago here who had a daughter, and trying to find the balance of, coach, I've got her these days, but we lift these days, and I've got her in the morning, but I lift in the morning, you know what? And I'm like, hey man, like, bring her here. I got 2 kids. She'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And like, just finding those balance of those kind of things is, because you forget, you know, for me, they're 18 to 22-year-olds. For you, they're 14 to 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
And you forget, like, oh, when that dude takes his helmet off and takes those pads off, he's a 15-year-old kid.
Yep.
You know, and everything that's going on in the world right now is for a 15-year-old kid, and whatever he has going on at home and his life is affecting him, and that's different than the guy next to him, different than the guy next to him, and so on and so forth. You know, it's one of the beautiful things about the game, in my opinion, at the college level and the professional level, is you get a chance to put these kids who there's no other place in the world where those 2 individuals would probably be in the same spot, let alone be friends, and let alone be even more than friends or brothers. But that's what football does. It doesn't look at race. It doesn't look at religion. It doesn't look at political affiliation. It lines you up and puts you in the same color shorts and the same color T-shirt and says, let's go. And that's, to me, that's the beauty of it. And that's what I love about it.
Love it. And even coaching, like, I've coached at so many different high schools, seen so many different walks of life.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I can relate to, not relate, but I could talk to any form of life because I've coached all different types of kids. But even as a coach, you're like, I've been on so many different staffs. You have to learn how to mold and like be around those people. You have to learn how to be around those, even if they're just 15, 16-year-old kids. You're like, I still have to talk to them like an adult, and I still have to figure this out. And so doing it for 15 years, I feel like I could go to any high school now. You could probably drop me off in the hood and I'll probably have a rough time, but I could probably figure it out real quick. And like you said, that's the best part, is we're all wearing the same colors. We're all wearing the same uniform, and we all have a common goal. And that's why sports is awesome, because you could have different opinions. You could have this, but at the end of the day, you have to come together at some point. And that's why during COVID, and I'm not getting political, I said coaches should run the states, because we would be so more unified than what we are right now. I just kept preaching that. I'm like, can we get a coach to like take over the states? Because I can't watch this yelling at each other anymore, and I can't take the hatred anymore. I can't take the Twitter fighting anymore. And I'm like, I'm going to stick to sports. I'm not smart enough, but I'm like, God, if we legendary coach here was going to retire at the time, I'm like, tweeted, I'm like, can we get him to like be the guy running the place?
Get it figured out.
Yeah, I don't want to get political, but I'm like, man, we need people to work together. Could you imagine all the states working together, calling each other like, well, how do we get this done? Because like a coach, that's what we do. And I'm like, this would be awesome. But sadly, that's not how the world works. And I'm like, I don't mean to keep you on here too longer. I do have something else I wanted to say.
You're good.
Probably a dumb question. I always ask coaches about the transfer portal because it affects people differently. A coach told me, who coaches at FCS, he said, sometimes it feels like FCS is becoming JUCO for like the bigger schools now. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, think about it. JUCOs, they go for a year or two, then they make the jump to FCS or whatever. To some FCSs, that's what's kind of happening is FCS still recruits high school the same, because that's still your guys' bloodline. The transfer portal is not as big, because what do we see on TV? Power 5 transfer portal. Like, that's not the reality all the time.
Right.
But then you develop that kid from a high school, he plays for a year or two, and then boom, somebody poaches them. Is that what you're kind of seeing at the FCS level, or is it not? Is it not exploding as much as we're all getting told?
Yeah. This is not going to be the answer you want. Yes and no. So, give you a great example for us. Okay, so the signing class we had 3 years ago, we had a receiver who left us after 2 years and went to Iowa State. He was their leading receiver last year, Jaden Higgins. And then there was a young man last year who left after the season, ended up transferring to UTEP. We just had a tailback transfer to Ball State. So we've had some of that go up. I would say we've had a lot more kids go in and not get what they wanted. But we have had some, and we had an outside linebacker who we had kind of moved to D line. He went in the portal and he's going to Cal now. We had one going to had one go to Memphis a couple of years ago, and so we've had some guys who've had success and went up, and it's a thin line because I think you want to say I actually tweeted something about this a couple weeks ago. You adapt. It's from Moneyball. You adapt or die. That's it.
Yes.
And
yep.
You don't you can sit here and shout at it and say, why is it like this? But it's really not changing. And so the approach I kind of take is like, listen, man, like there's a lot of high school kids that are slipping through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
When I went out and recruited in May, I was in Florida and I'm going to schools, and I recruit Tampa and Orlando. And as I'm going through these schools, one of the coaches said, "Coach, are you still looking at 25s?" And I said, "That's all I'm looking at." And I said, "I'm not on 26s yet because you've got 25s who just had a great spring or are about to have a great senior season that can be good players for me. And then, if they come and they develop and in 2 years they leave, well, here's kind of my rationale. If you're good enough, if you've played good enough to leave as a senior, it's my job as an assistant coach and our job as a program, as a head coach, and as a university to, with NIL and those kind of things, try to make it worth your while to stay, and try to build the things around you. And we've had kids who've had opportunities to leave who've chosen to stay. So all those ones that I said of kids who've went, we also just had an offensive tackle get drafted in the 7th round by the Saints who had opportunities to go places. We've got an offensive tackle this year who will get drafted who's had opportunities. We got a quarterback last year who could have went a lot of places and chose to stay and break every passing record here. And so for every one of those kids that leaves, there's 2 or 3 that stay. But the other piece about it is like, if you've played well enough to move up, then guess what? That proves that I've developed you as a coach.
Yep.
And guess what? We've probably won some games because of you.
Right.
They're not taking guys that aren't playing, and from here to go up, they're not taking guys that aren't playing.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. And the sooner you, to me as a coach at this level, the sooner you embrace that and understand that, hey man, I may be able to get in on a player who slipped through the cracks or somebody dropped late, that thought they were going to go to a group of 5 and didn't. And then, what do I do? Well, okay, I'll go to EKU. I'll play as a freshman, sophomore at defensive back, or play at wide receiver, or play at tailback. And, oh man, I was the conference player of the year and a freshman as a freshman. You know what I mean? And then I was an all conference player again as a sophomore. Well, then guess what? You're probably going to have an opportunity to go up. And when you look at it like that, and you pride yourself as a coach in developing kids that can do those things, then it becomes a recruiting tool at this level.
Yep.
Hey, just like everybody's always going to have their NFL wall. Look how many kids we've put in the NFL. Look how many kids that I've recruited and developed, and in 2 years they've went Power 5 from transferring from here. That's a reality. That's a real conversation that we have to have and have had with kids.
Yep.
I recruit the Kansas junior colleges. I recruit Iowa, Kansas. I recruit the entire Jayhawk Conference, Kansas, Iowa, and then I have NEO in Oklahoma. And it's funny because I'm picking those guys' brains on a lot of things about building a 1-year roster, because they're kids. Because you bring kids in, and kids leave. There's so much fluidity to your roster, even now, even in June, even in July. Of pieces leaving, pieces coming in, and that's kind of one of the things too is, and then the other thing is, and I'll say this, and I learned my lesson from this a couple of years ago. I had a really bad situation where I had a really, really good starter who was an All-American as a Sam linebacker, but the 2 kids I had penciled in as the backups, one failed out of school and one left. Well, now all of a sudden I have no backup, and I've got to go recruit and sign 2 backups for a kid who's an All-American. Hey man, why don't you want to transfer here and be a backup and back this dude up who's, he's currently on the 53-man roster for the Titans. No, nobody's beating down the door to come be a backup. You know what I'm saying? So being able to find a couple kids that would do that was really, really hard. And it was a wake-up call for me as a coach. It's like, and you talked about it being 365. That was a wake-up call for me to basically say, hey, listen, you got to always have somebody ready at your position. And, and if you're one of the guys on the staff that's denoted as a recruiter, you've got to have guys at other positions in your area, whether it's junior college, whether it's transfer, high school kids that you knew that are in the portal now. You got to have guys ready this time of year, pretty much from now until we start camp and the roster gets set. Because you never know who's going to walk out the door. You never know who's going to fail out of school. I mean, you do, but you have to have those guys ready. And where guys really, in my opinion, guys really get upset and really get frustrated with it is if they haven't done the work and they don't have somebody ready, that when something bad does happen, you need to be able to say, here's the next guy.
Right.
That's, that sucks that we lost this kid. Not happy about it. Let's learn from that. How are we going to keep from losing the next one? But here's the next guy ready.
Right.
And that's to me, you have to approach it like that. If you approach it like that, then you don't get caught up in, you can't let your feelings get caught up in it when something happens like that and a kid goes in the portal. You have to use it to your advantage. Right.
No, I love that answer. And a lot of coaches give similar answers. They're like, well, it's not changing until this revenue stream is going to happen next year, but who knows?
Who knows what's going to happen then?
I'm not smart enough to know. I'm just like,
Me neither.
Cool. I'm just like, oh, cool. That's a cool thing. But now your name, image, and likeness is going to change all over again. And and then I said, what about the transfer portal? Can we get that under control and just all this stuff? And it's like, well, it's not going to change.
Those are above my pay grade.
Oh, hey, if they paid me enough, I could fix it real quick, but they won't. And you know what? I'm cheap.
Our receiver coach would say, I'd mess it up for half that. I could mess it up for half of that. So whatever you're paying him, pay me half. I'll still mess it up.
I was like, hey, if you pay me $100,000 a year just to keep it under control, I'd be the happiest person on earth.
Absolutely.
And I'd fix it. I'd fix it real quick.
For sure.
And I was like, guys, don't worry. I'm going to write to the NCAA. You pay me $100,000, I'll get it fixed super quick.
There you go. Bargain basement prices.
As long as I can still coach and then do that, I am golden. It's all good.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, I've taken a lot of your time. I appreciate you coming on here. Sorry there was no ball, but I do like talking other things. But I appreciate it.
You're good.
Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks.